Choosing your audio setup as a content creator can be one of the biggest decisions that you will make on your journey. On top of some founding knowledge, a great mic and a mixer can be the difference between sounding like a professional or, well, sounding like you're talking through a tin can. So today, I'd like to compare two of the biggest names in this space, Beacn and Elgato. I've actually used both for years, so I will walk you through the pros, the cons, the cost comparisons, and ultimately which one I would recommend for each stage in your content creation journey. So for a bit of background, I actually started my streaming and content creation journey with a Blue Yeti before moving on to the Elgato Wave 3 USB microphone. I actually had a really good experience with the Wave 3 microphone, but eventually I wanted more control over my audio. The wavelength software was ever so slightly lacking at the time, and I just wanted hardware dials or faders right on my desk. That's when I switched to Beacn. I used their microphone along with the Mix Create and their software for a number of years, and it was fantastic. But recently I've actually come full circle and moved back to Elgato, this time using their Wave DX microphone paired with a Stream Deck Plus and their XLR dock. So yeah, I've actually lived with both setups, and I think I can give you some insightful information on the pros and the cons of each ecosystem. But first, let's start with the USB microphones, because that is where most content creators begin their journey due to the ease of use and step up from something like a headset mic. So starting things off, let's take a look at the Elgato lineup. The Wave 3 microphone is plug and play. It is super easy to get started with, great sound quality, albeit not super cheap, and the wavelength software gives you instant audio mixing to separate out your audio into individual channels with different mixes for yourself and your audience, all without needing additional hardware. If you're on a budget, the Wave Neo is actually the cheapest mic to access the Elgato software ecosystem, and whilst I haven't actually tested it myself, from my research, it's not quite as good sounding as the Wave 3, but still really respectable and more than good enough. Add in a Stream Deck Mini or a regular Stream Deck, and you've got an entry-level but really capable streaming setup with hardware to control your audio levels. But looking at things on the other side, the Beacn mic, I would consider a prosumer level USB microphone. It sounds excellent, has much more headroom than the Elgato mics, and integrates directly with Beacn's adjustment, mixing, and routing software. Thing is, if you also want physical hardware dials to adjust these mixes or audio levels, you'll need the Beacn Mix or Mix Create, which makes this a much more expensive path than Elgato's entry-level USB solution. Now, before we take a look directly at the costs of these three microphones, let me just say that in terms of audio within content creation, there is oftentimes a bar that needs to be met. Anything below that line is noticeably obvious, and anything above that line is honestly completely fine. And with at least a little bit of tinkering, all three of these microphones are above that line. But I'd have to say, in order of best to worst in terms of audio quality, I would say it follows the price tag, with the Beacn mic at the top and the Wave Neo at the bottom. So if you want something simple that just works with minimal effort and costs, Elgato wins at USB. If you want more quality and finer control right out of the box and you're okay spending extra, the Beacn mic and Mix or Mix Create gives you that. Although if you went for the pricier USB solution from Elgato, this cost gap does diminish quite quickly. And looking more directly at these costs, the cheapest solution is about $150 from Elgato, the more expensive version comes up to about $350, and the Beacn solution is around $580. But perhaps you've had your fill of USB and you're looking to take things to the next level, looking now at XLR, where you've got more quality, power, and much better long-term upgrade paths. But first, why do people go for XLR over USB? Well, to put it simply, USB mics are designed to kind of do a bit of everything, where they plug directly into a computer and already contain a built-in preamp and an analog to digital converter. Now, in doing all of this, the audio quality typically takes a hit, as the device has to do multiple things while still staying affordable. Whereas for XLR, the audio quality is the only thing it needs to focus on, so they will sound much more professional and the quality is a step above. But the downside, you will need an external device like an audio interface to transmit that signal into your PC, so this tends to be a fair bit more expensive and more complicated. So starting first again with Elgato, the cheapest path is the Wave DX microphone paired with the Wave XLR interface. Now that's a full XLR setup with software integration for around $260. But if you would like to step it up a notch, you've got the Wave DX with a Stream Deck Plus that also has the XLR module. This gives you direct tactile control of your faders right on the Stream Deck, which you can then further integrate into OBS or any other workflow. Now, both of these options work with any XLR microphone. You're not just locked into the Wave DX. That means you can start small and upgrade later down the line to something like a Shure SM7B or something like a shotgun microphone. Beacn's answer to the XLR side of things is the Beacn Studio, a full XLR hardware interface built entirely for creators. And just like Elgato, it works with any XLR microphone, which is ideal because Beacn actually don't offer their own XLR mic, just their USB one. But here's a bit of a catch. The Studio is just an XLR interface, and if you want hardware fader control of your game, mic, or chat mix, you'll need to pair it with something like a Mix or a Mix Create, further driving that price up. The cheapest entry in Beacn would be something like the Rode Pod mic at around $100 with the Beacn Studio and a Mix Create, putting you closer to $600. It is a much bigger investment, but you do get unmatched routing power, multi-track support, and hardware flexibility. So in terms of the XLR battle, Elgato's XLR path is more budget-friendly, accessible, and versatile beyond simply just audio with the Stream Deck ecosystem, while Beacn's XLR setup is more expensive but far more powerful at what it does. Elgato is great if you want simplicity, but Beacn is for those creators who really want complete audio control. And that price difference is quite evident, with the cheapest Elgato solution looking around $270, whilst the Beacn equivalent is much closer to $600. But here's where things get really interesting: two PC streaming setups. Now, before we dive into how Beacn and Elgato handle two PC setups, let me just first explain why you'd even want one. A two PC setup is where you use one computer for gaming and another just for streaming. The idea is to split the workload. Your gaming PC can focus on running the game at high performance, while your streaming PC handles encoding and broadcasting without affecting your frame rate. Traditionally, you'd connect the two systems with a capture card and run messy audio routing through software or cables. It works, but it's quite clunky and can be a nightmare to configure. Plus, you often have to make sacrifices like no multi-track recordings, so you could just send one full audio slot from the gaming PC to the streaming PC, and you need things like KVM switches to swap over peripherals, and your nice microphone is usually on one PC or the other, as you typically can't send the signal to both. Now that's where Beacn and Elgato come in, offering different solutions to simplify how your audio flows between those two systems. Starting first this time with Beacn, the Beacn Studio with Mix Create is built with this in mind. Simply plug a USB-C cable into the PC1 slot, typically the gaming PC, and a second into the streaming PC2 slot in the back of the device. Then you can send 4 audio channels from one PC to the other bidirectionally. So for example, you can send your mic, your VOD track, and your audience mix from the gaming PC to the streaming PC, and so that you can still hear things like alerts and other noises on the stream PC, you can send 4 channels from there to the gaming PC. And you can handle the volume and the mixing all from the Mix Create plugged into the gaming PC. Now, no need for complex cable or capture card audio routing or messy third-party workarounds. Right now, Elgato doesn't have a dedicated 2PC hardware solution for audio. They've released the Wavecast, a Windows-only app that lets you send audio inputs in one direction at a time from one PC to another over Wi-Fi or wired network, which is actually really cool, but a little too early in development as it stands. It does work, but it's not nearly as advanced as Beacn's hardware-driven approach, no multi-track flexibility and less reliability for heavy use. So if you're planning a 2PC setup, Beacn is the clear leader. Elgato works fine for single PC streams, but the Beacn Studio and Mix Create is a pretty awesome solution for dual PC audio workflows. But following the trend, you can see that Elgato's approach is significantly cheaper, whereas Beacn's is a fair bit more expensive. Now let's talk about the actual software and ecosystem side of things, because this is where the two brands take very different approaches, and this is true at both the USB and XLR stage. Beacn software is audio first. That's their entire focus, and it really shows. You get built-in plugins, multi-track recording, VOD tracks, and incredibly deep routing options, all inside their software without needing extra tools. It's powerful, professional grade, and designed specifically for creators who want total control over their sound. Advanced compression, expander, de-esser, exciter, and adaptive noise suppression are all incredibly powerful tools baked right into their software. And their EQ page with its detailed view and presets is still one of the best and most user-friendly that I've ever seen, allowing you to take the Beacn mic from the out-of-the-box sound to professional grade in no time at all. The audio routing table is far superior to Elgato and allows you to select what channel you want to send where with its own dedicated VOD track for something like Twitch. So if you want music to be one volume for you, another volume for the viewer, and gone entirely from the VOD track, easily done. Plus, with their latest update, you can now save various profiles and action them with a hotkey to allow for different mixes depending on which scene you're in OBS, fading the two audio levels as you swap them. And one really underrated feature of the Beacn software is the default device lock. Sometimes when you plug in a new device like a controller, Windows will just set it as your default device, which can be a massive headache midstream. With Beacn, if Windows tries to do that, it will force select your defaults back to the correct ones in the Beacn app, which is pretty cool. Now, Elgato takes a broader approach. Their ecosystem isn't just about audio. audio, it's about content creation as a whole. The Stream Deck integrates with OBS, Twitch, YouTube, and basically every tool that streamers use. You can change scenes, trigger multi-actions, and automate your workflow. And this ecosystem is only ever growing, with lights, cameras, prompters, and plugins for all sorts of things appearing on the marketplace with one-click installation. The Wavelength software is simpler than Beacn's, but it's still excellent. Whilst it doesn't have a built-in VOD track like Beacn does, plugins have improved massively over time. When I first used the Wavelength software, you needed complicated third-party VST directories, and it was a little bit hit and miss. But now it's far more user-friendly, and honestly, it's getting really close to Beacn's level for most streamers and creators' use cases. And honestly, the voice focus setting in Wavelength might be a game changer for creators in noisy environments. Plus, one thing I actually think Elgato does much better is you can apply plugins to other audio tracks other than just your microphone. So for example, if you wanted to put compression or EQ on your chat mix so your teammates don't blow out your viewers' ears, you can do that. If you want a purely audio-focused powerhouse, Beacn wins on software. But if you want a flexible ecosystem that covers both audio and all of your streaming tools, Elgato is honestly just unmatched. So now onto a summary of the pros, cons, and my recommendations. Starting with Beacn. It has best-in-class USB audio, software, and routing. The hardware is built specifically for streamers and content creators' audio needs. Plus, it has seamless 2PC and multi-track support. But looking at the cons, there is a much higher cost of entry. It has a much more complex learning curve, and it's got a particularly narrow focus on audio only. But with Elgato, it has affordable entry points at both USB and XLR. It's got a broad ecosystem looking at the Stream Deck, OBS, and other plugins, etc. It's very beginner-friendly to set up with some room to grow, and the Wavelength software is simple but powerful. However, there is no true 2PC hardware solution yet. It has less advanced routing compared to Beacn, and the ecosystem typically works best if you stay within Elgato. So, which one should you pick? If you're brand new to streaming or content creation, I'd recommend starting with Elgato. It is cheaper, easier, and integrates beautifully with the rest of your workflow. If you're more advanced, especially if you're running a 2PC setup or want ultimate audio control, Beacn is the clear choice. But I'd have to say Elgato is catching up. For me personally, I have moved back to Elgato because it balances ease of use and flexibility, and the new hardware and software improvements feel like a massive sweet spot between professional audio without having to break the bank. But honestly, both Beacn and Elgato are excellent, and it just depends on where you're at in your content creation journey and what it is that you need. So that's my breakdown of Beacn versus Elgato. USB, XLR, software, ecosystems, and even 2PC streaming setups. Which one are you leaning towards? Drop your thoughts in the comments, as I'd love to hear what you're currently using and what you plan to be. And if you enjoyed or found this helpful, consider liking the video and subscribing for more tech and gaming content. Thank you so much for watching, take care out there, and much love.